After they were done designing the Wing Zero, the 5 Gundam scientists realized that this machine was simply too much. So instead of building the monstrosity that is known as the Wing Zero, they decided to split up to each build their own Gundam that focused on their own individual strengths. And one of these machines was the Gundam Deathscythe, built by Professor G. As an expert in stealth, he made the Deathscythe into the ultimate stealth machine that would be perfect for the covert operations that the Gundams would be engaging in. The arm material that these Gundams were made out of, being the Gundanium alloy, did already have native stealth capabilities, but Professor G wanted to go even further for his ultimate work of art. Installed in the backpack were a pair of hyperjammers. These could spread special particles that would mess with both the radar and the visual sensors of enemy mobile suits, but not those of the Deathscythe itself. This made it virtually invisible and undetectable until it was far too late. And to make the most out of this stealth, the Deathscythe was also made to be the fastest of the original 5 Gundams, turning it into the ultimate hit-and-run machine. And to cool these thrusters, it also had large cooling vents. Its weapons then were equally formidable. On its head it has 2 Vulcans, which mainly serve as defensive weapons or for shooting down lightly armored targets. On its clavicles it has 2 machine cannons, which are slightly stronger than the Vulcans and can damage enemy mobile suits. On its left arm it has the Buster Shield, which not only acts as a strong shield, but also comes with some offensive capabilities. On its business end, it has 2 physical blades that can open up to reveal a beam blade. This can be used while the shield is on its arm, or with the built-in thruster, it can also be shot at the enemy. And then its signature weapon was the Beam Scythe. Thanks to its incredibly high output, it could easily cleave through multiple enemy mobile suits at once, and it could even be used underwater. Plus, it had a piston at the end that allowed for the Beam Scythe to also be turned into a beam spear. When not in use, it could be collapsed and stored on the back skirt. Something then that's not listed as part of its official equipment, but something that it did use once, is a flashbang grenade. And of course, if all of that just wasn't enough, it could also use whatever weapons were available on the battlefield as well. One time it scavenged the cannon for more long-range firepower. For the final touches then, Professor G painted the machine mostly black and gave it a very bat-like silhouette. All of this made the Deathscythe not just an extremely powerful mobile suit, but also an extremely feared mobile suit. It quickly became known as the Grim Reaper and gave birth to the superstition that no one who sees a Gundam will live to tell the tale. And the pilot chosen for this harbinger of death was Duo Maxwell, arguably the most chill dude of all of the Gundam Wing Gundam pilots. So when he heard what Operation Meteor was actually all about, he was less than excited. As with the other Gundam pilots, he did want to get back at Oz and the Alliance, but not at the cost of millions, if not billions of innocent civilians dying. So his initial plan was to destroy the Deathscythe, but unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, this plan failed because Professor G was able to find out about Duo's little scheme before he pulled it off. I guess he wasn't quite as stealthy as his Gundam was. But anyways, Plan B was actually suggested to him by Professor G himself. Why not steal the Gundam Deathscythe instead, and use it however Duo saw fit? And so he would descend to Earth with the Deathscythe, beginning their fight with Oz and the Alliance. At first, everything was going well for both Duo and the other Gundam pilots, but Oz was able to turn the tables on them. Not only were they able to use the Gundams to their advantage, but they were also able to push them back into space. And this is where we get to the one disadvantage of the Deathscythe. Because it was designed to be used on Earth, it wasn't equipped for battles in space, and despite Duo's best efforts to overcome this handicap, Duo and his Gundam would be captured by Oz. But fortunately for him, this wouldn't be all bad. Oz also decided to capture the 5 Gundam scientists and force them to build weapons that would surpass the Gundams. On the surface, they would work diligently and obediently on these new weapons, but behind closed doors they would also work on upgrading the wrecked Gundam Deathscythe and the also wrecked Gundam Shenlong, another Gundam that Oz managed to capture along with its pilot, Wu Fei. So when the time came for Duo and Wu Fei to escape Oz, they could do so in 2 freshly upgraded mobile suits that were able to kick ass. For Wu Fei, this was the Altron, and for Duo, this was the Deathscythe Hell. This upgraded version took pretty much everything that made the standard Deathscythe so deadly and upped it to 11. And of course, also an upgraded thruster suite that made it usable for combat in space. For starters, the Hyperjammer was now twice as powerful, and it also had its output amplified by the rib-like structures on its chest and even the wide trim on his head. And next up, we have probably the most impressive visual and performance upgrade, the Active Cloak. This cloak consisted of 4 armor panels that acted as the ultimate defense when closed, because not only were they treated with an anti-beam coating, but they also incorporated the planet defensor technology that was pioneered by the Mercurius. This allowed it to even stop a battleship-class beam cannon with ease. And on top of that, they could also make the mobile suit invisible. So combined with the Hyperjammer, the Deathscythe Hell was quite literally impossible to detect until right before the moment it decided to strike. And when the Active Cloak opened up, it could also serve various functions. In atmosphere, they could act as wings, in close combat they enhanced maneuverability, and because they were made to resemble the Devil's wings, they were also very good for psychological warfare. Their only downside was that the machine cannons had to be removed in order to install them, so really only a minor trade-off if you ask me. And with most of the other weapons, we also see some small changes, except for the Head Falcons, those remained the same. The Buster Shield then got an upgraded beam generator and more thrusters to increase its offensive capabilities, which then made it powerful enough to cancel out a shot of the Wing Zero's twin Buster rifle. And to scar its enemies both physically and mentally, its armor was overhauled to resemble a coffin. And finally, the normal beam scythe was upgraded to a twin beam scythe. According to the manual of the 1/100 scale model kit, the idea behind having 2 beam blades was so that the first one could cut through the armor of an enemy mobile suit, and the second could then cut through the frame. And for good measure, a thruster was added to the tip so that its slashes would hit that much harder. And what remained the same were its ability to collapse so that it could be easily stored on the back skirt, and the joints for the beam blade, so that the twin beam scythe could also double as a twin beam spear. When Duo first used this fearsome machine, it was said to only be about 70% complete, but in the following days and weeks, he would make those final adjustments to get the Deathscythe Hell completely up to speed, ready for the final battles. But the Deathscythe Hell wasn't the only planned upgrade for the standard Deathscythe. In the Gundam Wing Perfect album, we are also treated to the Gundam Crazy Beast, the Gundam Nightmare Centaur, the Gundam Dark Angel, and the Gundam Mad Tarantula. The Crazy Beast, true to its name, was probably the craziest variant of all of them. Not only did it look fearsome, but it also had the Zero system to make the most out of its various upgrades. For weapons, it came with 2 heat swords, razor-sharp claws on its feet, and weapon binders on the back that could shoot out bat-like funnels. Although they unfortunately don't specify how these bat funnels attack. Maybe they could shoot out beams, or maybe they had some kind of close combat capabilities. Other upgrades then included more thrusters and verniers for better speed and maneuverability, upgraded stealth systems, and skull-shaped pods on its shoulders and chest that could generate false radar images to confuse the enemies even further. In short, the crazy beast was meant to be the ultimate Deathscythe for combat in space, and allowed for a single mobile suit to fight against an entire fleet of enemies. For the jungle then, we had the Mad Tarantula, a spider-like machine with a fitting total of 8 appendages. It had 6 legs that allowed it to easily move through any kind of terrain, be it a dense jungle or an arid desert, and the 2 front legs were also reinforced for use in close-range combat. Its arms, meanwhile, have multiple omnidirectional joints, eliminating any dead zones, and its standard weaponry consisted of a spear in its left hand and a twin beam scythe in its right hand. Although, unlike the twin beam scythe of the Deathscythe Hell, this twin beam scythe has the beam on the opposite ends of the handle. And it would use these weapons to attack both enemies and to clear a path through the jungle. Combine that with the body's ability to rotate 360 degrees and a spider head-shaped multi-purpose sensor that can easily find and analyze hidden enemies, and this is one mobile suit that you don't want to encounter. Next up then, we have the Gundam Dark Angel, a version of the Deathscythe that was designed to be the ultimate warrior of death. Essentially, it took what worked for the standard Deathscythe and improved those aspects even further. It had 4 hyperjammers that allowed it to go completely invisible on the radar, and once within visual range then, it got 3 new tricks. It had 2 skull-shaped smoke emitters on the shoulders, 2 hologram projectors on its cheeks, and it also had a powerful flash on top of its head that could blind enemies. Not only did these additions make things easy for the Dark Angel while it was taking out the enemies, but they were also a major asset for escaping. And for weapons, it came with a double-edged beam scythe that it spun around like a propeller. And finally, there was the Gundam Nightmare Centaur. Despite its name and the skull on its shield, this was actually meant as a more chivalrous version of the Deathscythe. A noble variant based on a medieval knight with a focus on mobility. It was equipped with a heat lance that can extend, and the idea was to use its powerful legs to rush the enemy, get in a single powerful strike, and repeat. And to ensure its own survival, it got a powerful shield that could withstand beam attacks, and its shoulders were strengthened. There was just one small fundamental problem though. The legs didn't work as they should. The auto balancer couldn't handle them, they were too slow, and they weren't strong enough to handle the strain of the main one-hit strategy. So as a result, this variant was never built. And interestingly enough, this is the only one of the 4 variants that explicitly says that this thing wasn't built, seemingly suggesting that the other 3 were built. But while this is all for the TV version of the Deathscythe, we of course also have another lineage, the so-called Endless Waltz versions, which were then also used in manga like Glory of the Losers and light novels like Frozen Teardrop. The story behind the standard Deathscythe and the Deathscythe Hell remains largely the same, but the designs do have some interesting changes. Starting with the normal Deathscythe, the most obvious visual difference is that the armor is more streamlined and also a lot more spiky. The color scheme is also slightly different, with slightly more white being used. As for the weapons, it no longer has the machine cannons on the clavicles, the beam scythe no longer has the joint to transform it into a beam spear, and it can also no longer be collapsed for easy storage on the back skirt. It's now stored on the backpack instead. And the Buster Shield got completely remodeled, although its capabilities remained the same. The biggest change then is that it got some extra equipment and features. In the Glory of the Losers manga, it got the Rousette equipment, an optional backpack resembling the wings of the Wing Gundam that gave it atmospheric flight capabilities. And then in the Gundam Fixed Figuration Metal Composite figure, this Rousette equipment is given even more functionality. here it allows the Deathscythe to transform into something known as the Raven mode. But the ability to transform isn't the only difference here. Instead of one beam scythe, it now comes with two beam scythes, which can also be combined into some kind of beam scythe Naginata hybrid, and the beam emitters once again have a joint like they did in the TV version. And instead of a single Buster Shield, it now has 3 Buster Shields. One is still mounted on the left arm as per usual, and the other 2 are mounted on the top of the 2 beam sights, turning them into ad hoc double beam sights. For the Deathscythe Hell then, we again get quite some visual changes. Other than making the machine more grey and more streamlined, the biggest change was the active cloak. Rather than mechanical slabs of metal, it was made to be more organic, and it now resembles the wings of a bat. And the Hyperjammer was also changed quite a bit. Rather than having pods on the backpack that were amplified by those rib-like structures on its chest, all of these functionalities are now combined into the white parts of the shoulder armor. And for the weapons then, the Endless Waltz version could actually be considered somewhat of a downgrade, because at its most basic, it only came with a pair of head-mounted Vulcan guns and the beam scissors. A scythe that looks identical to the beam scythe used by the standard Deathscythe, but has been made slightly stronger. And that's it. But again, in other interpretations, it did get some more oomph. First up, in the Glory of Losers manga, the beam scissors were upgunned to the twin beam scissors, and 2 Hornet Buster Shields were equipped to the side skirts. And despite their slightly different designation, these Buster Shields were identical to the Buster Shield used by the standard Deathscythe. The Gundam Fixed Figuration Metal Composite figure then takes all of the Glory of the Losers equipment and goes even further. It comes with the Buster Shield Hell, which combines the shield of the Wing Zero with the coffin-like Buster Shield of the Deathscythe Hell TV version. The arm guards have been upgraded to Buster Stingers, which can now generate a beam blade, and there is the Adler equipment, which are 2 smaller beam sights which can be used in a variety of combinations. There's the Flugel mode, where they are used together as a beam scythe Naginata, Beak mode, where they're used together in a form that is very reminiscent of the twin beam scythe used by the Deathscythe Hell TV version, and Talon mode, where they are used separately. And then as cherry on top, it can also transform into Raven mode and Raven Claw mode, because why not? Whichever version of the Deathscythe Hell you subscribe to though, their eventual fate would all be the same. After having fought valiantly in the final battles of the After Colony era, it was self-destructed along with the Heavy Arms and the Sandrock.
After Colony 197, peace has returned to the people. And from this point on in history, weapons called mobile suits, including the Gundams, were never seen again.
During the new conflict that arose in the Gundam Wing Frozen Teardrop light novel, which, by the way, takes place after Endless Waltz, a new variant of the Deathscythe would show up, the Gundam Warlock. Not a lot is known about it, but it was supposedly an as-of-yet unknown prototype version of the original Deathscythe. And rather than being a standard bipedal mobile suit, it was originally designed as a beast-like quadruped machine. But Professor G seemingly wasn't very happy with this and forcibly transformed it into a more humanoid machine. So it was now a transformable mobile suit with a beast mode, which was called the Fenrir mode. For weapons, it has 1 or 2 beam sights, and in Fenrir mode, it looks like it has a Buster Shield acting as the head. But that is all that we know about the mobile suit itself, because in all of its illustrations, it is covered by a special stealth cloak. Although we do know about the pilot, Duo Maxwell, who is the son of Duo Maxwell. Not only is their name identical, but they also look identical. How creative. And for our final Deathscythe variant, we have to go to the TL's Impulse manga. Here, the Romafiller Foundation tried to make mass production versions of the 5 Gundams. And for the Deathscythe Hell, this was the Deathscythe Guilty. But despite being a mass production unit, on the surface, it was almost identical to the standard Deathscythe Hell. Its color scheme was slightly changed, and the active cloak was now mounted on the skirt armor rather than on the backpack. And that was it. The only actual difference was in the stealth system. Whereas the Deathscythe Hell could completely cloak itself, the Deathscythe Guilty used special prism particles that only rendered it invisible to one particular enemy. This unit would be used by former Oz soldier Themis, but throughout its service life, it would get badly damaged. So to quickly get it back into the fight, it was repaired and upgraded with prototype parts of the Hydra Gundam, and then rechristened to the Deathscythe Guilty Custom. It got new upper arms, new shoulders, and most importantly, the shoulder claws with their powerful beam cannons, which gave the Custom much better range capabilities. But in the end, it would be defeated by the Gundam Derringer Arms, which was the mass production version of the Heavy Arms Custom. And that's all that we know for the Deathscythe's development history. The sleekest Gundam of Gundam Wing that is used by arguably the most likable protagonist of this series. He might run and hide, but he'll never tell a lie. So if you enjoyed this video, why not hit that like button and stay tuned for more similar content in the future. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.